Joining us today is Michael Salerno of DeRose Barristers and Solicitors, a personal injury law firm that has been informing and protecting clients, Michael, for close to 40 years. Welcome today.
Good morning again, ladies. Thank you for having me back.
And today we're discussing dog bites, and that's kind of an interesting issue because insurance seems to always be based on where you are. So you're insured for things that happen on your property, but if you're out in the park with your dog and something happens, it's tricky.
Well, the good news with regards to dog bites or dog attacks generally, usually it is covered through your home insurance policy, right? We'll discuss that in a minute, but what's important for people to understand is regardless whether or not that you feel that you've done everything possible to ensure that your dog does not attack somebody or does not bite somebody, the law with regards to dog bites is strict liability. And what that means is, as long as somebody can prove that they've been either attacked or bitten, and they can actually locate the owner of the dog, then you're liable. It's pretty much simple like that. Mm-hmm. And one other kind of sidebar to that, a dog owner is something, the term dog owner, at least for the purpose of the act, is something that is a little bit fluid. And by that I mean somebody who's potentially deemed a harborer of the dog could actually be found responsible in the place of an owner or jointly with the owner.
So let's say a dog walker?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Some of the examples that I think most people can relate to, maybe a dog walker, potentially the groomer. Most people take their pets, dogs specifically, to the groomer, and if something happens while in the possession of the groomer, well, potentially there's the argument that they are a harborer for the purposes of any attack with regards to that. And with strict liability, as I mentioned, it is entirely the owner or harborer's responsibility or liability with regards to what's actually taking place. And the only way to kind of deflect any of culpability with regards to that is to show that the person who has been bitten or attacked actually played some role in that you can show that they were contributory negligent. So, for example, maybe somebody's walking down the street, they see a dog on somebody's property, and they go and try to attack it, and by that maybe kick it or be playful with the dog. Well, that could be something that potentially the dog owner could use to show that maybe it was not necessarily 100% of the dog's fault that they did attack, but somebody else actually kind of caused the attack.
They provoked it.
Correct.
So what would be, so Michael, you're walking down the street, you got your kids with you,
correct.
Okay, and so say a little kid goes and there's a dog carrying a stick, and
yes.
he goes and like says drop the stick and maybe reaches for the stick. Would that be enough to be considered, and then the dog attacks?
Definitely fact specific, but something like that may be something that's considered, right? In all fairness, the child is kind of doing something that a normal child would do, i.e. trying to pet a dog, but at the same time, that parent and obviously that child, in all likelihood, does not know the propensity for the dog to attack or the dog's personality, right? So you have to be very careful with that.
Yeah, well, let's say, for example, the dog is sitting on his front yard chewing on a bone, and a toddler who has no experience, wouldn't know.
Exactly.
And they might wander off. So then is the parent somewhat liable in that really, you have no business allowing your toddler to go on that person's lawn with that dog and try and take the bone from the dog. I'm just kidding.
Of course, no, this is an example. And I'm going to kind of argue both sides of it. Obviously, if the toddler was my client, obviously the family, because it would be a minor at that point, my argument would be that it's still the dog that did that, okay? Yes, the toddler had maybe shouldn't have been out on their own, but it didn't really do anything to the dog, and the dog attacked it, okay? And let's change the example a little bit. Let's say
they did do something to the dog because they took the dog's bone on the dog's property.
They were in the general vicinity of it, again, and I'm arguing that as being the lawyer for the client. But if I was the dog owner and the insurer for the dog owner, I would definitely say, well, you had no business as a parent to allow your child, first of all, to leave your premises, your home, and actually be out on their own without any assistance or any guidance. And actually, not only that, but you also went and the child went to try to take the bone. So the argument goes both ways there, right? But definitely that would be, if I was a plaintiff counsel, I would be concerned there because it sounds like under that scenario there would be some culpability or negligence on the parents.
Okay, Michael, we've been talking about humans, but I walk my dog daily through an off-leash area in the Toronto Ravines. Okay, now occasionally there's always a dog that barks, or what happens if the dog gets into a fight with a dog? Are you protected? Can you have any recourse against a dog attack on your dog?
Definitely. Part of the act is not only attacks on human beings, it is also a tax specifically with regards to animals. So, for example, under that scenario that you just put forward, that would be an issue. Now, damages that flow from that are obviously going to be a little bit more, let's say, generally minor, you would think, or more difficult to prove. So, for example, if your dog is attacked by another dog, but you have veterinarian expenses following from that, then that's definitely something
injured,
you can claim.
yeah.
Exactly.
What about the fact that my dog is, a purebred, wonderful
Yes.
dog that I was going to expect to gain my livelihood out of for the next 5 years? or
Again, if you
something?
can prove that somehow,
Yeah.
and that's something tangible that you can afford, you definitely have a claim with that. Definitely much more difficult to prove.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's kind of like that argument where somebody's involved in a collision and they're just kind of finishing high school and they want to be an astronaut, but there's no proof towards it. You're going to have
Yeah.
to establish that just the way
You didn't get
Yeah,
there.
I do remember a time when I had a lab and a pit bull got a hold, and the owner couldn't get the pit bull to
Unclench.
unclench.
Those jaws
I had
lock.
to go get a pot and he hit his own dog over the head to let him open, to get him to open his jaws.
Wow.
But if my dog had been a show dog, I would have probably done something.
Of course, definitely that would be too, but something like you said, minor. I'm sure there were some expenses that actually flowed from that, so there would have been something there for you. Like if your dog was attacked that seriously, there definitely would have been something. I'm sure as far as some type of assistance, medical assistance that are required.
But see, I didn't know that. I hadn't talked to you then.
Of course, you bad timing.
So, would this be okay? So, say my dog like bites somebody, nips somebody, the postman, whoever, because for some reason it's true. Dogs just really don't like
It's
post
pretty
people.
common, actually.
What is it covered under my home insurance or?
Good question, okay? Generally, it is covered under home insurance, but what I want people to understand is that a home insurance policy, at the end of the day, is a contract, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely encourage people to review to ensure that there is coverage for animals, specifically dogs, and also if there's any obligation on the individual to actually notify the insurer that
we
they
have
actually,
a dog.
correct, okay?
Oh,
And then also kind of what flows from that, we know that we're supposed to have our dogs licensed with the appropriate municipality depending on where you reside.
Mhm.
We know that they should be vaccinated and whatever vaccines that depending on, I guess, their lifespan, what comes up. Those are all things that need to be done. Okay, and those are things that I encourage the public, not only because of issues like this that may arise, but you don't want somebody to be injured because of your own negligence in overlooking these things.
What happens if, for example, you have your dog on a lead and the lead breaks? For whatever reason, it malfunctions, it snaps, it breaks, and your dog gets loose and goes
Again,
after another dog.
I'm happy that you mentioned that, but the issue with that is, again, it is an act of strict liability, the Dog Owners Liability Act. Okay,
So it's my fault that
it's
the
your
lead
fault.
broke.
It's your fault.
And that's
Now,
that's
again-
what precedent is in court?
Let's rewind here for a second, because we may be getting well beyond the scope of what we're doing here, but if the lead broke, then it's something potentially to look at, maybe with the manufacturer of that, whoever produced it, who sold
Product
it.
liability.
But now, kind of what you guys touched on last week, we're getting into a few different issues that may arise. But the general rule of thumb, what's important again, is that if your dog
It's
attacks,
your-
yes,
Even if
You're
it's on your property?
even if it's on your property. Now, something comes up there. Let's say that there's a criminal act being taken place. Like all these things go into consideration.
So if
right?
somebody breaks into my house
Well,
and
no,
I've
they're
got
in
a
a-
dog that bites him,
They're in a criminal act.
That's a different story because that's a criminal act. Under
and
that
so the
scenario,
dog is allowed to then bite them and protect me.
It would be no different than if somebody breaks into your home and you actually defend yourself. Again, it's going to be reasonable. If the dog mauls them to death, you're going to have a problem, okay, here.
Why?
But again, it is a criminal act, and these are competing interests that are balanced under this type of scenario, right?
But you would go to court and argue that my dog loves me and my dog will fight to the death
Of
to
course.
protect me. So
Of course.
therefore,
There's
Actually,
that's what he
classic
did.
Under this scenario, I wouldn't be going to court because that's a criminal issue. That's not something we deal with. But yes, from a liability standpoint, on
This
our-
happened in Melbourne, Australia. Okay, a household, and a guy owns a house, growing marijuana in the backyard, has a pit bull, and somebody hops over the fence to steal the dope. Dog takes his arm off at the elbow.
Well,
The guy that was the thief made off with $1 million.
In
these things you can't rate these kind of stories.
Yeah, you can't. Now everyone like was an outcry. It's like, well, he's trying to break into my property and steal my pot. Yeah, but what you're doing is illegal.
so
So it went
I'm
round and round.
But I'm thinking about companies that have guard dogs. Like, for example, places,
Beware of the dog.
where they have car parts and whatever, where it's acres and acres of stuff, and they'll have dogs patrol.
Yeah.
In that situation, somebody breaking in, do they really have an issue? Even if they have signs saying dogs?
If breaking in would constitute a criminal act. So
Okay,
under that,
so under that, they're okay.
they're safer. Then if it was me or you entering as
Are
an
they
invitee.
safer? But what if they really seriously hurt that person, like the situation in Australia?
Exactly, and something like that comes up again. It's competing interest here because the criminal act, and are we talking about a trespassing issue and then somebody's mauled to death?
No, they're trespassing in order to steal.
Yeah,
and the dog is there to make sure that they don't.
Okay, let's back up. Let's back up because it does get very confusing. Okay, so let's say I'm walking through the park with my dog, and my dog bites somebody else. What do I need to do? I mean, first I make sure the person's okay.
Yes.
But what information do I need to take down? How does it happen if I think that they may be going to sue me?
Okay, and in your case, as the owner of the dog, first
the
and
owner
foremost,
of the dog,
like we mentioned, all
I
things
admit
that are
it's
important.
my problem.
Well, you don't want to do that, but
okay.
But under that scenario, we know again, make sure the insurance coverage is there. Okay, and part of flipping that, part of some of the issues that I'm having with some of my dog bite claims, unfortunately, the dog owners don't have home insurance. Okay. So it makes it much more difficult on my end because when there is no home insurance in place, obviously we're pursuing somebody personally. And under that scenario, chances are if somebody does not have some form of home insurance, they probably don't have much in the way of assets, and you're kind of fighting a losing battle because under that scenario, again, if you can prove the damages and you can get an award but you can't enforce the judgment, you have problems, okay? Mm-hmm. Secondly, after the initial attack, that's the big issue. From both parties' perspective, especially the injured party, you want to make sure that you seek medical attention immediately. A few of the issues that may arise, not only obviously any type of scarring to prevent that from further getting worse, we want to make sure that you get any vaccinations that are available to you, because again, you don't know what somebody else is doing with their dog. From a standpoint of reporting, you want to make sure that the police are notified and or animal control.
Take pictures?
Take pictures, definitely, but that's kind of for issues that arise later to pursue a claim, okay? That definitely, you want to preserve that because fortunately, you hope that your wounds do get better. And the most gruesome photos that I have on some of my files actually are the beginning. A poor lady, a young girl, her arm was like completely opened up, blood everywhere. Unfortunately, it's got better. It's still a scar that she's going to live with lifelong. But the pictures that you see at the beginning, they speak 1,000 words literally under their circumstance. Okay, and the animal control report is especially important because if the dog owner had any notices against them, any muzzle orders, you want to make sure that those things were in place, number one, and to ensure that nobody else gets affected by this, right? Because at the end of the day, pets are great companions. I have a few dogs of my own. I love them very much. But at the same time, you don't want them to cause negativity in other people's lives. And you definitely have to guard against these things.
All right. Absolutely. And then obviously the same, if I'm the victim of a dog attack, make sure that seek medical attention, notify the police. Do I ask that person for their insurance information or just their contact information? What do I need to get from them?
Ideally, you would like that, right? But the reality is how these things usually play out. What's important, you just want to make sure who that individual is actually owns the dog, okay? Because all this stuff will come out from the police report and or animal control once they've taken the report. Keep this in mind. It's not like in a motor vehicle collision. There's always going to be a police report and or a collision report.
So at the time of the incident, should you be calling the police and animal control definitely. Tell them to stay there and then it's all documented.
Exactly. You want them at the scene.
So it's not like insurance where you say, I'll take your name and your insurance and we'll get in touch later.
You can definitely, as a last resort, if that's all you can get, obviously you want to get whatever you can, but most important, get the police and animal control the police to the scene, because animal control will be notified to the police and they will go in and take reports from all parties after the fact.
Because again, if you're taking pictures, it's hard to tell.
Exactly.
You want somebody to be there to verify for you that in fact it was at that time and place.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
All right. Michael Salerno of DeRose Barristers and Solicitors, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, ladies. Thank you.
Click the channel subscribe button for full-length interviews and more from What She Said here on YouTube.